In this video, we're going to run a bit of an experiment. What I've set up is I've set up a sine wave set at 440 Hertz with a level at minus 18. And this is minus 18 dB full scale, which equates to 0 on a VU meter. For this test, I've set up the tone generator going through the Neve 33609, which is currently off. And then we can measure our results with a VU meter, resulting at 0. And we can also measure our harmonic distortion with a spectrum analyzer from Insight. I've gone through and made sure that the threshold was set at the highest value possible here on the limiter, on the compressor. There's no gain makeup, and there's no gain makeup on the final output. So let's see what happens when we just activate this plugin. So right away, you start seeing some harmonic distortion appear here. This measures at 1.3 kilohertz, minus 115 dB. That's really low. Okay, so now let's start playing around with the settings. So the first thing is the headroom control. Let's see what happens when we engage this at 22. You'll notice that our harmonic distortion went up. It went to minus 108 dB. Now let's switch this to 14. And the harmonic saturation went lower in volume. Okay, so let's crank this up back to 22. And now let's engage our compressor. So simply by engaging our compressor without any gain reduction happening and roughly meeting the same output, which is 0 here, you see this harmonic saturation curve. And this is what gives way to the 33609 sound with its transformers. Now let's see what happens when we start applying gain reduction here. So the first thing we'll do is just adjust the threshold control. Okay, so from one notch to the next, you see that there's 0 dB of gain reduction. Then you see roughly 3, almost 4. And this is at a low ratio of 1.5. Let's go ahead and crank up some more threshold. Okay, so right there, we're measuring at about 4 to 5 dB of gain reduction. And then we can see the harmonic generation there. Now, because our meter is now below 0, let's go ahead and use the gain makeup to make up for that level loss. And we'll use the gain makeup here on compressor. Okay, good. So we're back to our original levels, but now we're compressing our signal about a little bit more than 4 dB. Let's turn our processor off. This is what our original signal measures like. And this is what it measures like with a gain reduction of 4 dB. Okay, now let's turn the compressor off. And let's do the same thing for the limiter. So we'll enable the limiter, and we'll have to watch this meter to see how much gain reduction we're doing. Now with the limiter, we have to use the volume makeup gain, which is right here. And now let's compare before and after. Okay, so let's turn our limiter off. So it looks a little bit different. The compressor has different harmonic saturation than the limiter. The limiter has more information above 1K, but a nice gentle slope. Okay, now let's turn off the limiter and the compressor. So we're back to our original signal with no gain compression happening here. So let me explain how the compressor and the limiter work, because they work in stereo. That means that the signal comes in through the compressor and then it goes into the limiter. So the volume going into the limiter is affected directly by this gain makeup knob right here. So we'll reset these settings. And now we'll switch the recovery mode to the fastest setting. We're not going to use automatic 1 or automatic 2. And for a ratio, we'll do a 2-to-1 ratio. Okay, here we go. Okay, so that's a 4 dB of gain reduction. And now let's enable the limiter. Now, if we want to drive signal into the limiter, we have to adjust this gain makeup knob. Now, the only thing about this plugin and the original hardware is that you didn't have a separate meter for the limiter than you do for the compressor. So you're kind of watching this meter right here, and that judges both the limiter and the compressor. Let's turn the limiter off now. And then let's finally use the gain output. Okay, good. So I think that we're averaging around the same level. We're compressing and limiting a total of about 4 dB of gain reduction. We're back to 0 here on our VU meter, but we see all this harmonic saturation information here. And that's what gives to the sound of the 33609. Again, let's remind ourselves and turn off the processor. This is what a clean sine wave looks like. And this is what it looks like after it's been processed through the 33609. Now, if I adjust the headroom, these meters are going to change because the amount of headroom and gain reduction are going to change. So hopefully that gives you a visual representation and insight of what goes on behind the scenes of the Universal Audio Neve 33609.